The Jemsek Clinic is best known today for its pioneering health-restoring work treating Lyme disease. That wasn't always the case. Dr. Joseph G. Jemsek, the founder and namesake of the clinic, spent more than 20 years with the Nally Clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he gained a reputation as one of the state's leading infectious disease specialists. Dr. Jemsek diagnosed the first documented case of HIV/AIDS in North Carolina and has been recognized with the state's most prestigious civilian awards from 2 sitting governors for his groundbreaking work in the field of HIV/AIDS treatment and research, the Certificate of Appreciation from Governor Jim Hunt, and the World AIDS Day Volunteer Service Award from Governor Mike Easley. In 2000, Dr. Jemsek started his own clinic with the goal of serving patients with HIV/AIDS. The facility grew into the Southeast's largest private HIV/AIDS clinic, serving thousands of patients from around the country in tandem with the clinic's charity outreach through the Jemsek Project. For more than a decade now, Dr. Jemsek has turned his focus to the treatment of Lyme disease. And the same traits of passion and compassion that made him a forerunner in the field of HIV/AIDS is evident in his pioneering work with Lyme. The film Under Our Skin documents how, at risk to his own professional career, Dr. Jemsek has diligently fought for patients' rights to receive health-restoring medical care against a prevailing school of thought that has left thousands of patients marginalized, misdiagnosed, and suffering. From his clinic in Fort Mill, South Carolina, and now here in Washington, D.C., Dr. Jemsek has treated Lyme disease patients who have sought out his care from across the country and from around the globe. Dr. Jemsek continues to push for reform of a broken healthcare system and for the delivery of medical care in America that is more progressive, focused, efficient, and effective. We are very pleased, and I am personally very proud to be able to introduce Dr. Joseph G. Jemsek.
So first of all, thank you to Greg, to Monty, to Pal. I congratulate you here today for your commitment to this honorable and noble cause. It's really amazing. I just think it's marvelous. And for your own obvious personal sacrifice, because I know everyone here is sacrificed for what you believe in. But mostly I congratulate you for your willingness to come together, to bond, to create strength and optimism through unity. And my heartfelt thanks also goes out for years of support and encouragement, which made it possible for me to survive, because a lot of you spoke up for me, were on site for me, and have never wavered. My thanks go to my family. Thank you. My family, my parents, my close personal and professional friends, some attending today, some couldn't be here, but their warm support is palpable as well. So it's a privilege to address you today. What happens here now is that this is another type of unity. I'm becoming one with you, and I am proud to do that, and I'm honored to do that. I hope I can live up to your expectations. I feel like the little boy who told his mommy, "I know God loves me, even though he knows all about me." Which is to say that I have a lot of warts, and you know it, and God knows it. And my mother, Mary Jane, certainly knew it. She had 5 children in all. She passed away May 24th at 10 in the evening, and surrounded by 4 surviving children. She was widowed for 17 years, and nothing was more important to my mother than family and staying in touch. She kept abreast of all developments in my career and all the children's careers. She was blessed with a remarkable memory, a strong sense of justice. She followed my entire career from the day I diagnosed that first patient in North Carolina, and then on to my increasing involvement with another epidemic, Lyme disease. Back in early January 2006, when the North Carolina Medical Board charges came out against me, when I realized that there were some doctors who not only disliked me but were obsessed with my demise, when I saw my dream of our grand new Rosedale Medical Center as a center of excellence for the twin epidemics of HIV/AIDS and Lyme-Boreliosis start to crumble, my world was in a tailspin. I was very confused. I didn't understand it. In retrospect, I was very naive about what happened. You see, I thought if you worked hard, or harder than anybody else, kept investing yourself back into medicine and the study of medicine, kept the patient and the patient's best interest as the focus of your work, you should be successful. I still believe that, by the way, but only today it's modified, a little more realistic, tempered, if you will. Meanwhile, it would take my mother over 20 years to get used to the idea that what I mainly did was take care of very sick patients with HIV/AIDS, with a disease that was mostly sexually transmitted among homosexuals, and that most of my patients died. At least dying with AIDS was the inevitable outcome until the mid-1990s, when thankfully our treatments started to reverse that trend, so that now we have mostly a chronic illness, a very expensive chronic illness, but a chronic illness. Mary Jane knew I'd won an award here and there, and so I must be doing something right. Now she was just getting used to the Lyme thing, and she was paying attention. She knew all about the bad news when it came out and all the unkind things the media were saying. And when we spoke on the phone during that tumultuous period, I explained what I could and how frustrated I was. This was all a big mistake. And she said to me, "Joe, did you do anything wrong?" I remember screaming over the phone. I said, "Mother, what? Really? What do you mean? Of course I didn't do anything wrong." "Are you sure?" So every mother in the audience kind of gets that because they know about warts. Warts only mother knows about. So in the next several years, it was fun because Mary Jane and I would talk, and I probably told her more about my business and daily affairs than anyone else. I would remind her of her indiscretion because I didn't have many chances to poke at her, so I did every time, and then she would deny she said it, and then she'd deny what she meant. And we just laugh and have a good time about it. In the meantime, it hurt her every time there was a vicious article about me in a national magazine, and there were quite a few. And throughout it all, one of Mary Jane's favorite sayings would help keep us going. She said, "Truth will out. Always tell the truth. It makes it harder for your adversaries and destroys the veil of deceit." I do so miss her. I am sure she's here today watching and smiling. So today is a small part of what I'd like to tell you. I am giving you glimpses of my journey, but I cannot tell you all. That will follow one day in a journal or some sort of publication. But it's a journey not to be believed unless you believe. And I think here today we have people who believe. I've relocated 7 times since I lost my clinic in my dream at Rosedale in 2006, a clinic which was arguably one of the most beautiful and functional clinics of its size ever built. I've been in D.C. since the fall of 2009 and in my current location on M Street since January 2010. Washington, D.C. has been wonderful to me. You have been wonderful to me. I remain profoundly thankful for the opportunity to practice medicine in this beautiful city, although clearly I miss my family. I'm separated from my wife and 2 children in Charlotte. But the dream is now alive and well again. I feel secure here. I have moved on from any anger that I may have had over the years, at least most of it. And to paraphrase a quote by Ziegler, if you learn from defeat, you haven't really lost. In the course of my life's journey in medicine, I've frequently questioned my role, my purpose. How did I come to be involved in the twin massive epidemics of our time? HIV/AIDS and Lyme-Boreliosis complex, so dissimilar and yet so alike. Both share a pattern of intense suffering, devastating impact on participation in living life, and incredible heartless stigmatism and scorn from the public, and worst of all, from the medical establishment. And I say establishment rather than profession, because medicine has in many ways become cold and impersonal where the role of the doctor-patient relationship is ever diminished by the politics and forces of our time. When I was a young boy, I read a novel, above all, A Physician, which left a lasting impression on me as I thought it was grand because it presented a sense of purpose and nobility I hadn't seen, and this happened among social and personal adversity faced by the protagonist, who was a hard-working urban physician. And I was so proud of my dad, who was a general practitioner in Mattoon, Illinois, for the man he was. I regret I never told him this, or at least I didn't tell him enough. I think I told him, but he was my hero and still is. I'm still trying to live up to him. Somehow, through the haze of my teenage years in the 1960s, I somehow figured out that my dad was the role model for me. There was never a more beloved man than my father. He was a saint to his patients, not because he had every answer, but because they could tell he cared. To quote the famed Sir William Osler, patients don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. As I cycle through my journey in medicine, I believe now more than ever that those of us in medicine should be honored and humbled to fulfill the task of healing our fellow man. We must be a lifelong student because our subject matter is vast, complex, and ever-changing. The doctor is the servant, not the master of teaching nature. The doctor is the servant. We should strive to work harder than anyone else, and yet our world is jammed by government and insurance regulations which limit and confound us and frustrate us, where insurance companies dictate medical practice without a license, where these entities grossly overstep their moral and ethical authority, and yet, because these entities have power, largely financial, they prevail, at least for now. But no bureaucratic agency can begin to solve the mysteries of medicine at this time in our evolution, not this century, not next century. The result of what's happened is a medical and public health disaster fueled by greed, arrogance, and the need for power, fostered by governmental and corporate interference designed to corrupt the bond between the patient and the physician. We as physicians have the power to help change the entire equation if we're guided by the principles in the Hippocratic Oath, which says, among other things, that there is nothing more sacred in our profession than the bond between the patient and the physician. The pact between the patient and the physician. Not a pact with a medical chart, not a pact with a medical textbook, not a pact with some outdated contrived guidelines, and certainly not because of what insurance companies dictate. Some time ago, I penned several aphorisms about the practice of medicine, a profession I remember as being more principled and much more honorable. One of the sayings was as follows: a life and journey in the profession of medicine is a gift from God. The good physician understands that humility, boundless curiosity, and abiding respect for the human condition, both in health and illness, are requisite traits for those who respect and honor his gift. And so at some point, we as physicians must unite to counter the outrageous indifference to health issues and quality of life, issues which are spawned by the profit and power motives of the medical business. These are anti-patient policies, which are morally reprehensible. We need to eliminate all possible avenues to corruption, including overreaching financial motives in the academic, insurance, and public health areas. These are toxic to the general good of society, and there's no better example of the manipulation of the truth gone wrong than in Lyme disease. No better example. Of course, this was brilliantly exposed in the 2008 documentary by Andy Wilson, Under Our Skin. To change the system, to restore nobility to the profession of medicine, we as physicians must get back to our principles. We must fight for the right to regain our role as the patient's preeminent counsel in spite of all, and we must earn that right by consistently being our patient's underlying advocate. Otherwise, we should be prepared to surrender our licenses for reasons of impersonating a physician. The PAL group gathered here today understand your calling. You have become astute. You won't be patronized, and you won't be fooled any longer. You're going to demand honesty from the healthcare system, whether it's the public health department, your primary physician, or some academic institution. It is okay for these parties to disagree with you, but it is not okay for any of these parties to ridicule you or your loved ones suffering from the miserable disease just because they don't understand it or won't accept it or won't discuss it openly and honestly. In medical school, I missed a lot of classes. I guess I missed the class where they taught us to ridicule and demean our patients for whatever reason. I find this behavior base and disgusting and so vile that to call it unprofessional is a euphemism. I'm highly embarrassed for my chosen profession every time I hear of this, which is essentially on a daily basis. To those who behave this way and they abound in our profession, I say, get busy learning and get busy getting humble or get out of the way. In many regards, we find that history repeats itself, and it's time we start with groups like PAL and the people assembled here today to learn from that history. Just like Lyme-Boreliosis complex, there was virtually no science in AIDS when the epidemic was underway. There was only limited data when the epidemic was in full swing, and thousands were dying each month. In fact, the etiology of HIV wasn't known to be a retrovirus until 2 years after I made the diagnosis of the first patient. So in these instances, how do physicians function who are willing to engage, willing to learn, willing to listen in order to truly help their patients without a CDC IDSA roadmap firmly jammed up their butt? First, I believe the physicians employed and imparted their expanded clinical experience to the benefit of the patient. What did you learn as a doctor? Apply it. And second, made healthy use of empiric skills, where empiricism is the practical application of knowledge gained through experience, through living, touching, feeling, listening, so that new concepts may be born, new ideas may be created, and older ideas modified and improved. Most knowledge comes through our life experience, and so medicine is no exception. In medicine, both our palette and canvas are comprised solely through our time and devotion with patients. That is, the learning process we undergo in building experience and sharpening empiric skills, which means you must touch, feel, smell, see, and listen. If a physician doesn't invest themselves fully into their patient, then they are nothing more than chart readers, becoming ever more stale with each passing year. To state the obvious, the only purpose for the profession of medicine is the patient. I mean, I thought somewhere it changed somewhere along the line. I didn't quite know why things were so different, but it's the patient. Patient is all of medicine, and medicine is all about the patient. End of story. In the past several decades, as physicians have relinquished control of their profession to insurance companies and hospitals, they have morphed into mere tools for the corporate medical society. Current physicians don't have a clue to the way out of this, which is, after all, a phenomenon of disassembly that's gone on within the last 50 years. Most physicians don't see what's happened and many don't see a problem. To quote Helen Keller, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. In the current context of our medical morass, I would amend Keller's quote slightly by restating, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision and being in charge of teaching medical students and practicing physicians, creating autocratic guidelines and feigning cluelessness when they translate into insurance guidelines, representing physician medical societies and caving to the corporate and government interests, managing hospital systems with physicians on staff who are financially handcuffed by this contract, and overseeing public health policies without any vision. Insurance companies don't get this. They just don't get that the doctor-patient thing. The innate right for the physician to exercise powers of experience and observation. They really don't want to understand them because it's more convenient and profitable for them to classify certain targeted physician behavior as experimental and investigational, the magic words which mean nothing. and therefore have a chilling effect on people who color outside the lines by making the physician a financial prisoner in a jail without walls, even if a physician initiative benefits the patient. Health insurance companies are quite wealthy. They were never intended to wield this sort of power and to hold immense wealth in their reserve accounts, tens to hundreds of billions of dollars. Experimental and investigational, words I've seen in my lifetime across my desk. These are hollow terms of convenience which suit the insurer and are seldom challenged, but which mean little or nothing other than the insurer won't be paying. Today, millions are suffering from borreliosis, where a few are aware of their illness, but most are not. Most have no access to expert health care because there isn't any. This has to change. Most can't afford care because insurance companies won't pay for care. This has to change. Ultimately, clinical approaches using new hypotheses, employing new clinical and biologic discoveries must be subjected to rigorous science. This is what I intend to do soon, God willing, as part of an emerging group of seriously concerned clinicians and scientists who see need for change. None of us are against science. We're against bad science. We're against ephemeral science put forth in name only to satisfy a quorum for publications that year, a quarter. We're against science performed and written to benefit the authors but not the subject. And we're against science whose only purpose is to manipulate opinion for the benefit of the authors or the interest groups they represent. The bad or junk science in the Lyme world is the legacy of the Lyme cabal, and they are really good at it. The best or worst example of this type of junk science in the medical literature is Mark Klempner's article in the New England Journal, 2003. Apparently it was so important it was rushed to press. Highly flawed study. There's been nothing to dispute it, and I'll tell you why. People who had different opinions just don't have access past journalistic censorship, which exists, and they don't have the resources to conduct large or even smaller studies. Klempner's report is a disgrace to all conscientious readers. There are no less than 8 fatal flaws, any one of which makes the study invalid, that are attached to this study. In a letter co-signed by 7 fellow infectious disease doctors, I sent this list of flaws in a letter to Dr. Martin Blazer, president of the IDSA in late 2005. In this letter, we argued for a more orderly review and serious study of chronic borreliosis and requested inclusion in the IDSA guideline panel, which would be making decisions about Lyme-Boreliosis. All we got in return was a series of 5 letters back and forth with the IDSA with self-affirming affirmation that their opinions were the best science at the time, yada, yada. Problem was, I've been immersed in some really good science in the HIV world. However, this had been fueled by billions of dollars in support of the epidemic, and this in turn attracted the best minds, the most sophisticated research. And in contrast to what I was experiencing for a number of years in these conferences which I would attend, and the amazing intellect and science and so forth, all fueled by the money, of course, I just remain appalled at the shallow and inferior clinical work being passed off for medical reports, reviews, and studies on publications in Lyme disease. It's mostly garbage, mostly circular logic, it's mostly repetitive, mostly flawed. The hypotheses are all flawed. But that's all there is out there. And it makes it hard for somebody that really wants to help, doesn't have a roadmap, reads what they can, but what they read is crap. And they get started and they get discouraged because it's a difficult road. It's a complex illness. There's lots of twists and turns. There are innumerable places you can get frustrated and give up, either the doctor or the patient, even though they have the best intentions. This brings me to evidence-based medicine, or EBM, about which I'll just say a few words. I need to bring it up as the Holy Grail. Everybody says, well, you have to have a prospective, double-blind, placebo-controlled, blah, 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 da, 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 da. You got to have the Holy Trinity. And the definition was created in 2000 by Sackett, endorsed by the Institute of Medicine. It reads, to paraphrase, the integration of the best research evidence with clinical expertise and patient values. Well, most academicians get the first part, but they forget about clinical expertise and patient values. Most academicians have either forgotten how to do clinical examinations, take a history, or they never knew. In fact, most of them spend about 5 minutes with my patients and, still send them a bill. Tell them what they don't have. But here's a fact that is that only 5 to 10% of EBM is covering only 5% of our medical practice or procedures, and we know that their generational change of 50%, but we don't know which 50%. So we know 10% through evidence-based trials, and we know that half that's going to change in 20 years, but we don't know which half. The facts are also that it takes years to bring a compilation of trials to press. The facts are that rapidly evolving disease syndromes and those patients who suffer from them are not well served by the tedious process of clinical trials. The fact is that there are further pitfalls that lie in the form of incorrect hypotheses that you don't know about. And this is certainly the case with Klempner. He made certain rigid hypotheses, and based on that, and they weren't right. These trials have to both have internal and external validity. Furthermore, they've been butchered by being narrowed down to not mean what the original definition implied, which is clinical involvement and patient benefit and so forth, or clinical expertise, patient benefit, patient effect. But now it's just about clinical trials, and again, they've left the rest out. These result in extraordinarily strict and limited results and reports, which are, again, highly flawed. So I think evidence-based medicine is wonderful. It just is very limited, and I wanted to make that point. So in my struggles to define my role and my self-doubt amid the prevailing and noxious criticism, this happened when I did HIV/AIDS because that was really hard, and it was, nobody liked my gay patients, but I did, and nobody wanted them, and so I had some heart-to-hearts then, but it really didn't become a major issue with me until I got into the Lyme world, and then I saw the confetti come down from the sky, and all these things were being told about me, and I just didn't get it. So through Providence, I found a prominent minister in Charlotte who agreed to meet with me, even though we were strangers and I'd never been to his church. We met at a pancake house, and I told him my story, and he listened. And this is a busy guy, so I'm not sure, why I got to have breakfast with him, why he listened. And I told him my story, and he says, "Joe, our God is a just God, and you'll be vindicated in your lifetime." And I said, "Okay, I'm not sure about that." I disagreed because I knew that he wanted that, but I just wasn't counting on it happening in my lifetime. And it didn't really matter to me because I knew that one day I'd be vindicated, but I might be dead, and that'd be okay. I knew I was doing something important. I was getting people better, and I was happy to do it, but I still didn't know why I created so much angst. But the minister kept insisting I would be vindicated. Again, I knew full well God doesn't work that way. He doesn't keep score and balance the tally at the end of the day or at the end of the life. He just doesn't. I know that. Doesn't work that way. Today's PAL event is an affirmation, a strong message that we need to carry on because, in a sense, I'm being vindicated in my own lifetime, and here we are unifying together. And to me, it means carry on. I know better than most how much you may have suffered personally or how much your loved ones have suffered, and that's why you're here in a selfless commitment. Please find a way to unify and strengthen. Please make this work. I know next to nothing about being a successful advocate or organizer, but I do know good when I see it, and I see a lot of good in this audience, and I see a lot of love in this audience. And today is a good day for millions who are questing for some remnant of hope because you're here. And you provide this hope through unity. God bless you. Since my medical board issues in 2006, many of my patients would end their visit with me by saying that they were praying for me. And they said it a lot. And they said it with kind intentions, but it would frustrate me interminably. I would be so frustrated. I didn't want their prayers. I didn't deserve their prayers. Stop saying prayers to me. This is misplaced devotion. Pray for your family. Pray to your God. And I became a little agitated about it. I never lost it in public. I never was rude. But I was like gritting my teeth walking out the door. And the prayers kept coming. So on another encounter with this minister in Charlotte, I asked him, this has been bothering me for 2 or 3 years, and it really bothers me, and I know there's something wrong with me because it shouldn't bother me, so what's up with that? I thought he'd give me some Bible speak and ask him anyway. And he just answered me just like that. He just went, Joe, they're not praying for you, they're praying for your gift. It was like the weight of the world went off my shoulders. I said, oh, that's cool, not me. I said, oh my God, that's brilliant, thank you. Okay. And, you know, I just, that was an enormous moment in my life. It helped me understand the struggle and what I meant to people, and that I had a commitment, that I had a gift, and I had to use it. Everyone here has a gift. Gifts bring demands and expectations from the ones who grant it. We all have talents which are special, some declared and others waiting for opportunity. The inspiration to create this organization is a gift. Inspirations are gifts. And it came together, it's happening, it's really happening. I learned another life lesson later on about unity and support. In September 2009, just as I was preparing to come to DC and start yet another practice, we had some family issues. My wife, Kay's mother, Bet, died from ovarian cancer in the house. And within a week or so, Kay found she had breast cancer. And then literally the next week, our 5-year-old daughter began bruising after playing with me. And we used to rough house, and I got fussed at for being too rough. And then to my horror, you know, my wife would say, look at the bruises on her. And I said, yeah, that's kind of bad. But then one day I looked at her back and front, and she was just one big bruise. My heart just sank. I know too much. So I shook with fear. I said, oh my God, I hope this is a platelet depletion or thrombocytopenia due to a CMV infection or a viral infection. Please, God, let it be that. And I hope for this, but I was stunned with fear. And this was when I was in Fort Mill. And I got the phone call. And got the news, dropped the phone, apologized to my patients, said I couldn't function right then. I've never walked down on patients. So Jordan was hospitalized. And we began a 2-year journey. Meanwhile, Kay's treatment and prognosis were good. But now she had the incredible stress of her daughter with a fatal illness. And I had just moved to Washington away from the family. And I just remember thinking that if Jordan died, I was ready to give up. So if Jordan lived, I might live. But she was always the priority. So I had no choice but to practice in Washington because I didn't do anything else, and there would be millions of dollars in medical bills, and I had to have insurance, and I had to start over again. So you just go with your bedrock principles and don't worry about what you can't control, and you just put one foot in front of the other, as long as you can. So it was at this time that I was grateful for the minister's advice, because I'll tell you, Kay and Jordan together, what a team. The prayers upon prayers, prayer groups upon prayer groups, Facebook, it was amazing. So now you think they'd said prayers about me before? Oh my God. And but I was good with it, thank God. And we heard so much. They brought gifts and stuff and all these hugs, and it was all good. I was just, but it was inspiring because I was talking to patients that were just trashed. I mean, were sick, and they, in spite of everything, wanted to make sure that they ask about my family. So these experiences taught me to think about prayer in a different way. And now as I reflect on Jordan's miracle, she did survive after 2 years in a transplant. I believe in prayer more than ever, and I believe that prayers for children always count. So now it's time to turn our attention to the massive and harmful epidemic, which is Lyme disease. In 2004, I termed the disease syndrome Lyme-Boreliosis complex because I felt this disease represented a complex set of infections capable of involving all the body's systems, but in particular the nervous system. The disease manifested predominantly through the effects of spirochetal invasion of the brain, disrupts the brain's most primitive and basic functions. As a specialist in infectious diseases, I couldn't identify any other pathogenic process which so efficiently and completely corrupted the human brain and nervous system. This is truly a new disease for the human species. And if one's allergic to the word Lyme because of its contentious polemic qualities, then Borreliosis complex works. In any event, there's little doubt that this Borreliosis complex reflects a confluence of pathogens insidiously impregnated into the human biome, all pathogens imbued with the capacity to be persistent and to be reactivated within the host, with the spirochete as the most versatile and hence the tip of the spear. It took me a couple years to realize this concept back in the early 2000s, but once I had it, and I've never thought of Lyme as a working solo ever since that time. The Borrelia species has won the microbial genetic lottery. I'm sure some of you have heard that term before. And that makes it the ringleader most likely, but I think there are other very important pathogens. We have no highly evolved natural immunity to these things, and our adaptive immune response against these daunting pathogens is simply overmatched. In fact, it's clear to me that widespread invasion of these pathogens and the resulting dysfunction and exhaustion of the immune system do more than wreak havoc on our bodies through the romp in our nervous systems, but also create immune-altered states which allow for the expression of other less virulent pathogens or maladaptive responses, which in the genetically susceptible create a whole spectrum of chronic illness syndrome. So we not only have this nasty, complex Lyme-Boreliosis complex, but we have all the comorbidities that are awakened, triggered, supported, and the immune susceptible. This is an important concept because it takes this one awful epidemic and really extends it into other areas which are vast. And the study that needs to be done is you take 100 patients with new serology and you get confirmation of that. How many of them have Crohn's disease? How many have thyroid nodules or pituitary adenomas? How many have unexplained cough or interstitial cystitis or interstitial nephritis or inflammatory colitis? How many? You're going to see numbers that are well above the national average, well above. So this is a study that's begging to be done because it is so very impactful. So what we're talking today probably is clearly the most important health issue of our time, without question. By creating widespread cellular perturbation and chaos, and by exhausting and disabling the immune system, the human biome is now at risk for expression of a smorgasbord of human maladies. And the utter horror of living with Lyme disease, with unrelenting inflammation, oxidative stress equating to crushing fatigue, neuropsychiatric disabilities progressing due to invasion of all nerve cell types, has been shown clinically. Living with sleep deprivation or wretched pain. If that's not enough, then we have a Pandora's box of other chronic illnesses. Lovely. All the rheumatic disorders, all the neurodegenerative disorders, many others are in play. So we all know intuitively there's far too much chronic illness in our world, And I believe the complex interplay of these infections has changed the human condition interminably and irreversibly. I don't see how the human species can ever possibly evolve to get ahead of this disease paradigm. What about the patient? In the main, not even accounting for the comorbid conditions it may engender, Borreliosis complex may so distort the human experience that self becomes unrecognizable. Critical loss of competence, congruence, livelihood, processing information, even if to acquire simple joy and life's small pleasures, are all at risk and all lost in many. Those afflicted often become so compromised they are totally dependent on others, and sometimes because of the loss of independence and ability to communicate, the others give up and abandon them as caregivers. Caregivers leave, divorces rise, relationships on all levels disintegrate, lives and careers are unfulfilled, and much more when this illness converts its victim from a participant in life to one who can only take. It is awfully startlingly clear to me that previously highly functioning individuals afflicted with this illness are unable to function, and yet it's shocking to me that the family or health care practitioner can't see that and can't connect the incongruity. So now we have on our hands, and we should congratulate our public health service and our academic medicine. We have in our hands the worst possible situation for the public health of our society. We have a malicious, marauding disease with no name, a disease with no standard definition, no meaning for research or funding and process, no significant durable resistance from the immune system, and no respect from the medical establishment nor from any of our society. As I have portrayed, this is a disease which rips the heart and soul out of a human being like no other disease in the history of man, a disease which robs awareness of self and one's ability to effectively interact with your environment. Our patients are robbed of basic emotional and physical function, terrorized by their own body in revolt, and in danger of being marooned forever, missing life and becoming a virtual shell of their former being, so pale and so empty that they eventually become unrecognizable to all who knew them. In the care of patients in the twin epidemics in HIV/AIDS and Lyme-Boreliosis, I have seen the best in the human spirit and I've seen the worst, when life is at its end, either figuratively or metaphorically. I know about desperate causes, I know about desperate measures when there are no answers and no hope for resuscitation and survival. In my first dozen years as an AIDS physician, the end of suffering came to my patients by virtue of sweet death. Our patients with borreliosis want to die because the suffering and disconnect is agonizing and unbearable. But they cannot die, at least not on cue, and so they suffer without relief and without hope until many finally decide to take their own lives because they are living lives of nothing. An article by Ryan and Deasy, who are psychologists, published in the American Psychologist, addresses 3 elements that must be present in some combination that help us fulfill our lives. Elements that promote self-actualization. That is, to be the best that you can be. These 3 critical attributes are autonomy, which is the extent to which we have the ability to control our own lives. Maintaining connectedness with others, that is, love of family, willingness to meet and build on relationships. And 3, exercising competence using our gifts to continue to learn, to continue to experience. Our patients with advanced Lyme have none of these things. No wonder there's no joy. No joy. Lives of nothing. And so here we are now, where the rotten junction of petty political agendas and the anesthetized and archaic modus operandi of a corporatized medical community fail these desperately ill patients. What began as hubris and confusion has spawned the lie too big to confess. With academic institutions and community physicians maintaining that these grievously ill patients who suffer from these compromising conditions are all malingerers. Their lie is that the patient, not the illness, has become the problem, and it's past time to tell the truth. This morning I've made things sound quite grim and hopeless so far. Indeed, they are grim, but never hopeless. You know the old adage about change, especially profound change, historic change, important change. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, and then they attack you and want to burn you. And then they build monuments for you or to you, or else they take credit and possession of your invention. Well, I don't exactly know where we fit in the monument business, but I'm pretty sure that no monuments will be built for the haters and cheaters who have operated for decades on the wrong side of history. Here's what's going to happen, in my opinion. Because there is rolling thunder in the acquisition or accretion of tens of thousands of new cases every month, because the growing ranks of those affected is indiscriminate, because the entire approach to this epidemic by the IDSA and CDC has been simply confounding, incomprehensible, and counterintuitive, because the budding of real science and definition of this epidemic cannot be held off forever, because there's justified rage brewing by millions now impacted by this disease, because many in the growing army and the victims of this illness are doers and leaders, we will see a very nervous morphing of the epidemic, an epidemic which has already been slow played for a couple of decades. The exit to the truth will be ugly and bloody, like a naked child being chased through a briar patch. This child represents the birth of our ideas and the culmination of our experience in the horror which is Borreliosis complex. This child represents the struggle to be heard, to be validated. This is the child who has been crying for help for years, for any source of kindness and concern. What comes out from the briar patch may be so traumatized, bloodied, and disfigured that it is unrecognizable. Those in power will attempt to capture and manipulate this mutilated child and cleverly reconfigure their position through this child, gradually sending the message, for example, that Lyme-Boreliosis and polymicrobial immunosuppressive infections are caused by stealth pathogens and not autoimmunity, and that they hold the key to understanding and controlling the domain of chronic illness. In other words, they'll steal the message. Chances are that Lyme-Boreliosis complex will be chopped into multiple parts and assigned to various divisions at various universities and research centers. The science will be controlled, as always, by those who have adapted and have done so to maintain and further their careers in academia, and the grants will flow as the information comes out drip by drip. I'll stop now with the gruesome metaphors, but I hope they do make the point. That's how I feel about it. And I look at the suffering of millions around the world, and that so much of this could have been anticipated and blunted, not prevented, but blunted. I'm stunned that our medical system, which includes private and public health, has abandoned their obligation for working with the palette and canvas, which is the source of all knowledge and learning, which is their patient. So what's a realistic goal for all of us? My goal is modest. I would like to see a substantive change which includes the training of thousands of doctors who specialize in this pandemic, and I'd like to see it happen in 15 years rather than 50 years. That's my goal. There are precedents for forming new societies. In fact, each specialty in medicine's done this sometime or other. The most recent is the HIV/AIDS epidemic, where the IDSA incorporated HIV-MA, which is a subsidiary, when AIDS came out in full force, a lot of the infectious disease folks wanted nothing to do with it. So doctors were invited to join this organization, HIV-MA. Almost all the doctors were gay, and they came to assess the thousands of gays dying who dominated the picture of the illness. And it was interesting to see doctors in all fields come out of the closet, because I was there at the beginning. So I'd see plastic surgeons, pulmonologists, pediatricians, internists, thoracic surgeons. I said, that's really interesting. That's cool. That's all right. You name it. And I was there with them. But for the record, I love women very much. And sometimes I vote Republican. So this epidemic will demand the creation of a society similar to HIV-MA, a society dedicated to the study and care of patients with complex illness due to stealth pathogens. It's germane to say this because if we don't do it, it's not going to happen anywhere soon. It won't crop out like a sprout out of Hopkins, Duke, or Mayo. It's just not going to happen. And so as I wind down, I'd like to share some short goals for the next several years. One, I understand the importance of generating and publishing peer-reviewed research. I understand this is the path to credibility, and that knowledge and insight must come through traditional medical journal channels, as hostile and as obtuse as they've been for so many years. Nonetheless, this is the most direct path to credibility. It has to happen. I've known this fact for many years, and I hope to do it in my clinic, collaborating with other clinics. In recent weeks, I've had collaboration with Chairman of Microbiology at Vanderbilt, We have some good ideas. I've been out to Stanford and have titular conversations out there with the people, immunologists and ID out there. I'm just now recovered in D.C. to the point that 10 years later, I hope and pray I can finally use our rich database and start to tell the story of this illness. And I want to make a sacred obligation to you and everyone that this happens. All I need is a prolonged period of stability, free of any and all lawyers, and free, well, maybe not Susan, and free of medical board harassment, and then I'll make it happen. Second, we had a big party 4 years ago. We had an Into the Light Gala in Charlotte. We had 450 black tie. It was Andy Wilson's first theatrical opening. It was unofficial. Later, next week, he went to New York for the official one. But it was a blast. It was filmed. There were awards given, including to NatCap Lyme, Monty and Greg, Turn the Corner, P.J. Langhoff, and Jordan Fisher-Smith did a fabulous job as an MC. I'd like to do that in D.C. and blow the doors off. Shall we begin to plan for 15-16 in the nation's capital, maybe at the Kennedy Center or some other prestigious venue? Third and last, if we're serious about jump-starting the research about this disease complex, affecting the whole world, we got to think about our own center of excellence. We just do. I think there's a lot of money. I know there's a ton of money out there. People just don't know where to direct it, where to give it. They want something. Nobody just wants to throw money away and then see it evaporate. But if you have something which is going to be so productive and so enriching, I think we need bricks and mortars. And I think we need a curriculum. And I think we need accreditation. And I've already been offered land. And this is not my thing. I mean, we have multidisciplinary, but certainly I think it was an idea that I've shared with others. But we have land in this area that's available to us, and I think this needs to happen because I've observed patients or doctors or students actually, or doctors, who come to the clinic and they shadow and their jaws drop the whole first week, and then they can't go back and take care of Lyme disease. Come on, you can't do it. They need multiple sessions. They need intense training, and it's a very complex disease, and it changes all the time. There's a lot to learn. It's a new vernacular. It's like learning a new language. So we need some sort of curriculum, and I think that can happen. I think it needs to happen because if we do this in the next 10 or 15 years, we're still going to be way ahead of Hopkins, Mayo, and the rest. It's not going to happen with them. Finishing up. In honor of this great consortium of talent and commitment present today and future doctors who will commit to the challenging and noble cause in human diseases, especially those diseases caused by stealth pathogens, I quote a verse which is ripe with its motivating and sustaining substance and which I think embodies the essence of what many here today represent, in unity. I believe this verse embraces you. And it makes me think of you who have devoted so much in faith and hope, knowing that you can do no less. And it is through him that this deep fire within me continues to grow greater than ever before. It is a roaring fire that is inextinguishable. It is a fire to fight for the sick and unheard, a fire to become greater at loving people and learning how to be a better human being. Through obedience to him, he continues to provide one miraculous lesson after another. And so I will continue to serve his people so that I will continue to serve him, showing his amazing love to all whose path I cross. Can anyone guess where it came from? No, this is not a biblical verse, which is what I thought it was when I read it. This is written by one of my patients who was desperately ill for a number of years, couldn't function, participate in life, much less go to school. Like so many others you know, whose lives are forever and then ultimately changed by this illness. Her world and her being were rapidly evaporating in a dark cloak of suffering and pain. In time, however, she became one of God's miracles, and now she sits among you today. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge Jen LeBlanc, third-year medical student and future doctor for borreliosis complex and related pathogens. Up you go. Thank you very much.